Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing part 2 of my January wrap-up. So I am wrapping up all of the things that I read last month. Last video I did my wrap-up for all of the sci-fi, fantasy, manga, graphic novels I read, but this video I'm going to be talking specifically about thrillers, horrors, and contemporaries that I finished last month. So this is in chronological order. If you didn't see that last video, I did update my rating system, so I don't assign star ratings anymore. I assign these ratings instead. So all-time favorite, loved it, very good, pretty good, average, not for me, couldn't stand it. So I will say I had a really fantastic reading month, and I am so excited to be talking about some of these books with you guys. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and start the video. The first book I read in the month of January that was a contemporary book is an adult contemporary, City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. I had heard about this book from Jashana. Her channel will be linked down below. This is one of her all-time favorite books, and she really got me excited to read it. So I was expecting to like this, but I did not expect to love it as much as I did. This is actually now a new all-time favorite for me as well. It is very much a character-driven novel that doesn't have necessarily the most fast-paced plot. It's very slow-moving, but the writing style is so funny and witty and beautiful, and I just cared so much about these characters and their lives and the drama. I was hooked from the get-go. I loved the writing. I think it's very much hit or miss if you're going to connect with this particular writing style. And if you do, I think this will end up being a book that you fall in love with. It follows the life of a woman named Vivienne who, as a teenager, moves to New York City to kind of get out on her own, be more independent, find herself. It's very much this kind of coming of age story, and you follow multiple years of Vivi's life. And the format of the book, she is telling her story to this younger woman who is basically asking Vivi, how did you know my father and what did he mean to you? So the whole time you're kind of building up who Vivi is as a woman and kind of her story, and building up to finding out who in the world this mystery man is that we know we're going to get from the very beginning of the book. And she tells this story in the format of a letter to this younger woman. I loved it so much. And I don't think that the mystery of who this man is was necessarily the biggest part of this book or what kept me going. It was really just the writing and Vivi's life and how funny and clever and beautiful it was. The themes explored about just being free to do whatever you want and not being judged for it. The time period for this book, it takes place in the 1940s and kind of moves through multiple years. So it's very much this time period where women were expected to be a certain thing, and so if you didn't follow that exact template, you were considered lesser or, just not doing the right thing. And it's very much about Vivi kind of coming into her own and challenging that a little bit, and all the characters around her kind of challenging that. And it's a beautiful book about just being whoever you want to be and just being proud of that. I loved the messages of this book. I personally am not a huge musical theater kind of person. I don't care too much about fashion. This book made me care. I loved all of the descriptions of the theater that Vivi gets hired at and is working as a costume designer at this theater, and she is very much into the fashion and the party lifestyle, and it's just so good. It's so good. I need to physically reread this book. I listened to it on audio, and the audiobook was fantastic. I was laughing out loud so many times. I don't think I've read a book that's made me laugh so hard as often as this book did. I loved it so much, and I need to physically reread it so I can just tab up all the different quotes and just funny little anecdotes and dialogue, and it's just so good, so good. So I'm so glad that Jashana raved about this book as much as she did, because I probably wouldn't have picked it up otherwise, and I would have missed out, because this is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I love it. The next contemporary book that I read last month was Homegoing by Gyasi. Oh my God. This is another one that is actually a new all-time favorite for me. This book is so beautiful, so thought-provoking, so just emotional, and I loved it so much. So this story is told in a way that I've never seen any story told before. It follows at the very beginning these two characters. Both of them are sisters, but they don't know it. They don't know the other exists. One of these sisters is born into this village in Ghana and is considered very well off in this village, and actually gets married off to an Englishman and moves into his mansion and lives with him as his wife. And then the other character perspective is her half-sister that she doesn't know exists and was born in a different village and ends up actually being one of the slaves that is kept in this mansion in the basement. So little do they know that these two characters who are related, one is being treated very well, is married off to this very wealthy Englishman, and the other is a slave. And so then the one sister gets shipped off to America, and the way the book is told is you only follow their character perspectives for like one chapter in the book, and each chapter is quite a chunk. So you get quite a lot of story for both of those characters, but then once you move on past their perspectives, you don't get them again. Instead, which perspectives you get are actually descendants of those characters. So you get the sons or the daughters' perspectives in the rest of the book, and you explore how these two women who were born so close to each other in Ghana, how different their descendants live all the way to modern day. So you go through multiple generations of time and explore these family trees, and it was just told in this way that was so powerful and so well executed, and I cared so much about these two different bloodlines. And it's interesting how that was such a choice that the author made to only give you kind of one chapter worth of each character, because usually, I mean, if I had only gotten one chapter of another character in a different book, I would have, not connected to that character or not remembered them. You don't forget any of these characters. Every single perspective you get is so important for what's to come for characters down the line. It was so beautiful, and the themes that this explores, it goes through multiple generations from the 18th century all the way to modern day, and it shows how these characters grew with society and their descendants grow with society, and society changes around them, and just all the different time periods you follow these characters through. Oh my God, this book is unlike anything I've ever read, and just the way it ends, just bringing it full circle, I can't recommend this book enough. I truly can't recommend this book enough. This is one that I thought about for so long after I finished it, because it was just so beautiful how it was told, and how a moment of time or a decision that one person makes can so deeply affect what's to come in the future for future generations. If you haven't picked it up, I implore you to do so. Definitely an all-time favorite, definitely one I will want to come back to very soon again. Then the last contemporary book that I read last month was The Dream Daughter by Diane Chamberlain. This one got a solid, loved it. Oh my God, I had such good luck with the contemporary books that I picked up last month. I loved them all so much, and this one is no exception. I wouldn't say this is like all-time favorite status like the previous two were, but my goodness, was it amazing still. So this follows the story of a woman who's living in the 1970s, and her husband goes to the Vietnam War and is unfortunately killed during the war. However, the woman in the 70s, she is pregnant with their baby, and when she goes to her first ultrasound, she realizes that this baby has a heart defect that's actually fatal once the baby is born, and there's no way for them to cure this defect. There's no way for them to help her baby. She just kind of has to accept that she's going to lose her baby once it's born, and this is heartbreaking because it's the last piece of her husband that she has, and she wants this baby so much. You have her brother-in-law as well, who reveals to her that he has actually traveled through time, and he has come from 2018 and ended up falling in love with the main character's sister and decided to stay in the 1970s, but he was never meant to stay. He was supposed to go back to his own time at one point, but he decided not to. And so he knows a way to time travel. So he offers a solution to her where he says there is a possibility for doctors in the future to help save your baby, and offers to her a way to time travel to 2001 to get a surgery that would essentially save her baby. And that's all I'm going to say. It's really emotional. I don't think it helped that I was pregnant with a girl while I was reading this. If you don't know, I am due at the end of May, and just found out that it is a girl that we are due with. And so knowing that this is about a mother who is trying to save her unborn daughter, I was like, okay, this is hitting a little too close to home. I was very emotional while reading it. It just came at the right time in my life, and it's so beautiful. It is such a beautiful exploration of the lengths someone will go to save their child, and I loved it so much. It was so sad though. It is such a sad book, but it is so hopeful, and you don't leave this book like feeling empty or hollow or anything like that. You finish this book with this sense of hope and contentment, and it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's hard to talk about, but it's really good, and it made me cry a lot. So I highly recommend. Moving into some thriller/horror books, the first horror book that I read last month was actually Carrie, which is a part of this bind-up from Barnes & Noble. Carrie by Stephen King. I had never read Carrie. I had never seen the movies, but I knew the premise of Carrie. I kind of knew the basic direction of the book. I knew what was going to happen. I knew there was that epic prom night scene. Carrie follows the story of a little girl who has a very rough childhood at home. She lives with a mother who is very religious and is essentially sheltering her in really abusive ways, and is very verbally abusive to her, and it's a bad situation. But Carrie realizes she has telekinesis, so she can move things with her mind. And she is very much bullied at school. She's just had a really rough time of it. And it's just this story where you feel the tension building until finally she snaps. And I think everyone kind of knows about Carrie and this story. It's so iconic. I loved this book so much, way more than I thought I would. This is now actually my new favorite Stephen King book. This got a solid loved it from me. It's a book that I wouldn't say is necessarily scary, but it is so tense, and you just feel this sense of dread just building in your gut the whole book, and you feel so bad for Carrie. Like I hurt so bad for her, listening to what she had to go through and how she had to grow up and the bullying, and it was just, I cared so much more than I thought I would about that character. And so towards the end, you know, you understand where she's coming from. And again, I don't think that this book is necessarily scary. If you're looking for the scariest books by Stephen King, if you're looking for a true horror book, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to you, but it's horror in the way that the most horrific part of this book is the human aspect of it and how cruel humans can truly be. And it definitely leaves you feeling pretty upset. So it was really, really good. Definitely one that I will not forget anytime soon. The next horror book that I read was My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. So I had read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires last year and loved that book. I definitely wanted to pick up more Grady Hendrix, and I'd heard really good things about this 80s inspired book. This is so 80s. It's ridiculous. I loved it so much. Look at the cover. Even the cover just shows you how 80s inspired it is. It's so much fun. This book is just a blast. Like, I had so much fun listening to this book on audio. The characters, the friendships, the nostalgia for childhood, just everything in this book either made me laugh or made me kind of squirm in my seat, because it is a horror book. So you do get, you know, the title states, you do get an exorcism and you do get some demon possession in this book. This one is actually probably also a new all-time favorite for me in terms of the horror books that I've read. And again, it's not scary. Like, these are not books that are horror because they have like jump scares or the worst imagery or anything like that. It's not going to keep you up at night. It's horror because of just the sense of dread and just you know what's coming, but you really don't want it to come. It's so good for that reason. And I thought that Grady Hendrix did the perfect amount of building up the characters at the beginning so that we could really, really just sit back and enjoy the second half of the book and the ending, because I was already so invested in these two main characters. I haven't even said what it's about. So it's about these two best friends who grew up just like childhood best friends all throughout elementary, middle, and high school. Now that they're in high school, they go on a trip and something happens to one of the girls and she goes missing for a couple of hours, and they find her again, but she's a little different. Like, she's acting strange, and you know from the title, she gets possessed by a demon, and there's a lot of buildup of her while she's possessed. Her best friend knows that something's wrong but doesn't know exactly what it is, and I loved it. I loved the two best friends so much. And it's really funny because exploring the childhood scenes of them just bonding when they're just two girls in elementary school, it like brought back memories of my own childhood. It was really spot on. Like, Grady Hendrix did a really good job of writing this friendship. I really connected to it. It was great. I will say, because this book is set very, very firmly in the 80s, and we do have high school students in the 80s. There is definitely language that is used in this book and phrases and terms that are used in this book that to today's standards would not be okay, would be offensive to use. So if that is something that would potentially bother you, Grady Hendrix does stick really faithfully to the 80s decade. So if that's something that would bother you, then maybe approach this with some caution. But I do think he does a really good job of making this feel so 80s. Like, you feel like you are transported to the 80s. It's so much fun. So overall, not the scariest book, but I still loved it. If you love just a fun, almost satirical take on the possession story, I highly recommend this. If you love 80s nostalgia, highly recommend this. It's just a really fun time. So I'm so glad that I read this one. I had a blast. And then the last book I have that is horror from last month that I read was Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesare. I was a little disappointed by this book, I'm not gonna lie. So this book sounds awesome in theory. It is about a girl who moves to a new town, and it's a small, like, middle of nowhere kind of town, and the town mascot is this clown, because that is like the biggest corporation that is in this town. Is the mascot is a clown for that company, and so this clown kind of represents this town. And one night the clown turns into a killer clown and goes around trying to kill all the kids. That sounds great in theory. I love the idea of like a fun killer clown story. I think I learned something about myself as a reader while reading this. This was like very much reminiscent of a slasher horror movie in book form. And I don't think I like slasher type of horror. I've never liked watching those types of movies, and I don't think I like reading about it in a book. The problem is, with this particular book, I, first of all, didn't really care about any of the kid characters. I kind of found a lot of them insufferable. So when bad things started happening to them, I was like, I don't really care. And then the other thing is, once you find out kind of what the twist of the book is, I found it really silly and outlandish, and it kind of took away all the like horror elements to this. So I'm going to say that this book was average. I think that there were a couple of really fun scenes. There's one scene in this book that I had so much fun listening to because it reminded me so much of the movie Scream. The opening, if you've seen Scream and you know that classic opening scene, there's a scene that reminded me so much of that in this book. But besides that, I kind of found this just really over the top silly. And I think that's my problem with horror books that don't go supernatural in some way. I find it just becomes, I don't know. I don't want to say like I'm not going to like any non-supernatural horror, but just this one for some reason, I just didn't. The twist was so silly. Once it was revealed, I was like, really? Like that's the twist? It's like, it's kind of dumb. So yeah, this unfortunately didn't work for me, but I would still recommend it, especially if you like slasher horror movies. Oh my God, I think you're really gonna like this book. I think it was just a me thing. I think it's definitely personal preference that I just did not connect to this story. I didn't really care about the characters, and all of the like kind of blood and guts scenes, I just didn't really care. So yeah, I'm a little bummed. I was expecting to really enjoy this one. It just took a turn that I found kind of silly. So bummer. Average, but that's okay. They can't all be winners. So those were all of the contemporary and horror books that I read last month. Did you see any that you've read before? What did you think of them? Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!